It's a beautiful document. Well, we can show it many times.
So colleagues, while we are here trying to solve a technical problem that happened in the room, let me, greetings to all. We are now finally officially launching this event after this beautiful video that was produced by our colleagues at IBES, and I'm sorry that there was a technical glitch here. Excellency, dear colleagues, dear delegates, welcome to the second of three side events that we are organizing as part of the 2025 edition of the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development for the UNEC region. These three events are co-organized by UNEP, UNEC, and the Geneva Environment Network in partnerships with various other organizations. In this session, we are joined by leading experts to discuss education for biodiversity and sustainable development goals in action. And this second side event is organized in partnership with UNESCO, IUCN, the Foundation for Environment Education, and the government of Cyprus. Before I hand over to the moderator, Wendy Aznake, the Policy and Partnerships Coordinator for the Pan-European region of UNEP, and the architect also of these events, let me share some quick housekeeping rules. The documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available as usual on the webpage of this event. The transcript is also available in 100 languages, and you can use the Q&A box to post your questions that we will use to feed the discussion if time allows. We had the first side event at lunchtime, Geneva time, and we'll host a third event tomorrow. We invite you to join also us tomorrow and to rewatch the event that we had earlier today. With that, Wendy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. As she mentioned, this is the second side event of the day. This morning we discussed a little bit about the interconnection between environmental risk factors and non-communicable diseases. We talked about the availability of policy, the availability of science, the availability of the evidence, but the result is basically we have more people who are actually impacted by environmental risk factors and leading a high level of non-communicable diseases. And that begs the question again here, what is the role of education again? How do we use education more effectively in terms of not only addressing non-communicable diseases, but also a variety of social, economic, and environmental challenges we have. Now, with that in mind, this particular session is dedicated to something that wonderful that came out of the COP16 on biodiversity is the development of a global plan of action on biodiversity education. I think it's a very timely one that requires as many of us as possible to be involved in this initiative. With that in mind, we have an excellent lineup of experts who will speak to the issue. And I'll start with UNESCO. Bernard, one of the most dedicated persons I know in terms of this particular subject and more. And UNESCO being the leader when it comes to the champion on biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, equitable benefit sharing of genetic resources. What key lessons can we draw from its long-standing commitment in raising awareness and fostering a deeper understanding of biodiversity? Over to you, Bernard.
Thank you, thank you, Wendy. Well, part of the response is what our UN Secretary General said, that without nature we have nothing, and without nature we are nothing. So if we start from that, we can understand that education, learning, a lot of things we do are needed. Next. So I've chosen this African proverb: if you don't know where you come from, you can't know where you're going. In terms of capturing some of the lessons learned from UNESCO in terms of biodiversity education. UNESCO has a long history with biodiversity, including the education and learning part of it. I'll just throw out a few dates. 1948, Fontainebleau, which is where actually IUCN was founded, was already talking about elements of education and learning. 1968, UNESCO organized a global conference on basically man and the planet, and that's when people started talking about biosphere, biodiversity. Then 1992, the Rio Summit, where again, somebody said, okay, we need to have some actions. So one action chapter was about education. And then along the way, with partnerships with UNEP, for instance, and others, evolving into providing education on biodiversity, about biodiversity, and for biodiversity. With, let's go to another summit, Johannesburg Summit 2002, where a number of one of the outcomes was that there was a need for reinforcing education for sustainable development, which includes various sustainability issues, and bringing us to how do we deal with biodiversity, climate, and other issues in terms of education and learning. Next. But when we take a look at school curriculum around the world, we see that basically only 1/5 mention biodiversity and only 1/2 mention climate. And most of the time it's in very general terms. So if we are going to look to save biodiversity, we have definitely, we need to do a lot. Next. Yes, it's clear that education, sustainability, education, biodiversity, education, climate, education, ocean, all go hand in hand. Next. But let's look at it from a few, like say, key areas. I think one of the first thing is that it's clear that education increases environmental awareness, environmental wanting to do something for the environment. It's clear that what we need is to promote an integrative, innovative, and holistic vision of education and lifelong learning, which takes in all forms of education, not what happens just in schools, but also training, information, professional development, awareness, looking at biodiversity and nature, but also looking at formal, non-formal, informal systems and settings for learning. We have to take all of that into account because we have to adjust to all these components. Next. We also need to focus on the ideas that we need better stewardship, better, more active citizenship for people to actually respect nature, respect solidarity, intergenerational responsibility for taking actions for the planet, whether it's for biodiversity, climate, or other issues. Next. We also need to look at the question of values and behaviors, which brings us to the thing that we need to really focus on placing environmental education, biodiversity education at the center, and actually making it mandatory in all schools and all education programs. I'm being a bit revolutionary here, but that's what we have to do. We have to put biodiversity at the center of all SDGs. If we take that vision and that approach, then we can start moving things. Next. We need to also look at the interlinkages between biodiversity, climate, ecosystems, livelihoods, culture, society, economy, and most important, everyday actions that we ourselves can take to preserve biodiversity. Next. So basically, the way education is actually needs to change. We need to improve things. Next. So we need to, well, as my Director General has said, improve our relationship. To improve our relationship with nature, we must first improve our understanding of how we affect basically nature and how nature affects us. So we have to think about ourselves, but about also the others and what's around us. Next. So we need to adopt a whole sector, whole institution, whole society approach. So it has to be both in policy, in curriculum. Um, Teachers, of course, need to be trained in biodiversity education, but also school leaders and other leaders in different sectors need to be prepared to change the way they deal with biodiversity. Next. One key point, yes, is advocacy, but advocacy needs to go beyond. If you just take the four letters of SIPA, it needs to go beyond communication, needs to go beyond education and promotion and awareness raising. It actually needs to go to co-creation, empowerment, participation, and of course advocacy to embrace the bigger concept of sustainable development. Sustainable development is not just environment, it's also economy, society, and culture. And it's also well-being, both human well-being, but the planet's well-being. Next. In doing that, we need to bring in traditional indigenous knowledge, different ways of thinking and relating to nature, different ways of practicing um, how we connect to nature and how we teach about it, uh, and how we share knowledge on this. Next. And of course, like for any other thing, we need funding, we need resources. Not only money resources, but also resources as people. And that's where I would say young people have a key important role to play. They should be, just as biodiversity needs to be placed at the center of the SDGs and addressing education on SDGs, young people should be at the center of this biodiversity push, both in terms of teaching, learning, acting, and advocating. Next. To cite Wangari Maathai, you cannot protect the environment unless you empower people, you inform them and you help them understand that these resources are their own, that they must protect them. We need to provide processes, cooperative processes based on networks and partnerships that help promote a more comprehensive response to biodiversity-related challenges among stakeholders at basically all levels, individual, local, regional, national, international, across all the different sectors. Next. Yeah, basically, we have to learn and act for our planet in a better way. Next. And to quote Saint-Exupéry, the one who wrote The Little Prince, in life, there are no solution. There are only motive forces, and our task is to set them acting, then solutions follow. So basically, yes, we can talk about the solutions, possible solution in a meeting like this, but actually it's setting the motion to get people moving, to get young people moving. Actually, young people are getting us moving because they're challenging uh, governments, challenging corporations and challenging schools to do things differently. So to conclude, I would say yes, we can uh, work together to try and develop a global plan of action on education for biodiversity, but it has to be a plan of action that actually brings about action, but also is co-created, co-developed, involving everyone involved that needs to be involved, meaning basically everybody. So it's a big task, but I think we have the stakeholders, we have the elements to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. That is very useful to setting the scene. And indeed, we live in the midst of nature, but we don't even understand what nature is all about, and we abusing it day in, day out. And I think part of what this push to create a better understanding of the co-benefits in terms of what nature is actually providing to us, education plays a very, very powerful role. And with that in mind, I think it is the spirit of the COP16. One of the reasons they pushed for this call to have a global action on biodiversity education. It's based on this principle. And Sean, I wanted you, if we could reflect a little bit why this initiative is so crucial, and what progress has been made so far in terms of galvanizing a global movement for biodiversity education. Over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Sean Southey. I chair IUCN's Commission on Education and Communication. I'll speak first, and then my dear colleague and education expert, Kathleen, will follow up. We are a global network of almost 2,000 education and communication practitioners, and I encourage you, if you want to become part of this free network, just Google joining an IUCN Commission. Next, I'm going to talk particularly about the global plan of action itself. Bernard has said why we need it. We need it because we need culture change. We need it because we need financing. We need it because, frankly, we're not winning the battle for climate. We're not winning the battle for biodiversity. And we can't shift that unless we look at the key architecture of how decisions and behavior is made. And that's embedded in education. Keeping in mind, as Bernard said, that's formal education, what happens in a school, non-formal education, all that happens around the school, in the clubs, in the associations, in the world, and informal, what happens on the newspaper, on TV, at the dinner table, in the church, the mosque, and the synagogue. Next, we need a revolution, a tsunami of action for education. And I'm not going to go into all the details of why, but my dear colleague Charles will speak later on nature-based solutions. And I just remind us, how can we have nature-based solutions if we don't have nature-based education? If we don't have literacy on climate, literacy on biodiversity, how can we act? And next, what we have now is a unique moment when the education field is pushing for more biodiversity in it. Next, but also the biodiversity field is saying we want more access to education. Both sides of our families, the education practitioners, the biodiversity, nature, climate practitioners, have recognized this opportunity and need to work together. And the CBD process, the Convention on Biodiversity process, has given us a really important moment. I am a campaigner by background. I design campaigns. And we have an opportunity to run and develop a true campaign to change the way education is designed. But a campaign like this needs everyone's action, needs many organizations, many practitioners, many citizens to speak at whether it's local level, sub-regional level, or national level, or getting involved internationally. Next. We at IUCN have been dedicated the last 3-4 years of thinking what we would do to advocate, what needs to be done. And really 5-6 key elements have come up. We need more champions, and champions for holistic education, not climate, not biodiversity, not water, but climate and biodiversity and water. We need much more money. We need bigger hopes and dreams. We need teachers to be equipped and prepared and have the efficacy and agency that they can go into the classroom and deal with not just their students' climate anxiety, but their own climate anxiety. We need education that promotes justice, social justice, environmental fairness. I like to summarize it by we need education that has nature in the center. We need to put nature back in education and education back into nature. And the global plan gives us that opportunity. Next. It's been a big year for us in the World Environmental Education Congress, happened in Abu Dhabi in January of a year ago, 2024, really advanced and started the IUCN family, thinking more deeply and profoundly about integrating education into our work. Next, we held a conference with the University of Southern California, UCLA, in May of last year, the first nature-based education summit that IUCN has been involved in. And Kathleen will take you through a little bit of why IUCN is such an important player, because it represents so many different practitioners in the environmental space. Next. And we started a task force, and we extend at this point a formal invitation. If any of you want to join this task force, you're welcome. Bernard is there, Kathleen is there, Pramod, who you'll hear from later, is there. It is a place where we can come together and support education at scale. One of the 10 working groups is on the Global Plan of Action. Next. Through this task force, we helped UNESCO and the CBD organize an education day, a full-fledged comprehensive discussion in the key space at the CBD meeting in Cali last October. And we're very happy that out of that meeting, next, came the Global Plan for Action. Now, you'll hear people talk about the Global Plan for Action on education for biodiversity, but really it's an 8-9 page comprehensive document that calls upon us as a global community by the next CBD meeting, which is in November of 2026, to come up with a really comprehensive plan. Next. My dear colleagues who are so organized from the UNEP team have posted the link to that document, and I encourage everyone interested in this space to look at it, because it really looks at aligning all aspects of the biodiversity, global biodiversity framework that came out of the Montreal meeting. All those goals, 23 goals, each of them need to be supported with an educational focus. It reminds us that education is comprehensive and multifaceted, and it pushes hard for capacity building and funding inside the plan. Next. To do this right, we need national alignment, and education is complicated. In my country, Canada, we have 10 different provinces. Each province has its own Ministry of Education. We have another 3 territories and 640 plus Indigenous communities, each with their own educational approach. Aligning these at the national level, then bringing them together internationally and looking at how do you finance, how do you surface best practice, how do you share, how do you galvanize. No one believes this is an easy task, but it's a critical task. Next. To do that, everyone's going to have to act. Next. And the key people called upon for the global plan, the key organizations are the CBD, UNESCO, IPBES, whose wonderful video we started with today. And I will note that the transformative change agenda does call for one of the key elements of transformative change is a deep connection to nature. And of course, education and early education is one of the critical ways to do that. It also calls on all of us, other interested organizations, to get involved and be part of that work. Gibbon is also particularly mentioned, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Next. And next. And I want to leave you with a last slide before Kathleen goes into thinking and providing more detail on nature-based education as we see it in IUCN. And the last slide I want to leave you with some dreams. We believe that if we're going to do this, and we're going to do it comprehensively over the next 2 years, we have to think big. Imagine if every school had a green schoolyard, outdoor learning, a vibrant living learning space. Imagine if every child had an immersive experience in nature, such as camping, every year, multiple times during their career. Imagine if every teacher had excellent materials to instructions and mentors and had efficacy and agency. Imagine if every child planted a seed, grew a plant, shared and ate the food. Imagine if we had enough money to do this work properly and put education in the center of nature and nature in the center of education as it deserves to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Next one, please. So, Sean mentioned that we are building our global plan of action on the nature-based education. I was asked to speak a little bit about the nature-based education, what does it mean, and also how the teachers and the students can be involved in this big, bold plan. Next one, please. When we started to act and formalize the task force on nature-based education, we have to ask ourselves why to step in this position. And I have to say, we feel the legacy. So IUCN is the oldest and one of the largest environmental organization, conservation organization, has diverse members, more than 1,600 members for 760 countries. And we have government, civil society, and in the commissions, we have individual experts. So we have a huge potential with our networks. And IUCN helped, Bernard already mentioned those events. IUCN helped forming the environmental education, defining it in 55 years ago. And IUCN has a commission on education and communication we are representing, and we have over 1,700 educators, communicators worldwide. And I forgot to mention on the slide, IUCN Commission on Education and Communication helped to create the first CEPA toolkit to CBD. And we had a training series based on it. So we feel the legacy, and we think that we have to act upon. Next one, please. There are several studies that shows that nature literacy and nature connectedness are the future of the conservation and sustainability. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we analyzed with the Children and Nature Network more than 120 researches how people act, why people act for nature, why do they have the conservation behavior. And it was a key finding that connection with nature is an essential. This study will be renewed soon, so you will find it, but if you look at it, would like to see the resources, you can find it on our website as a home to us all and the connecting documents, and you can download them. Next one, please. So we formed a new term. It's not a new term. Many people used it, so we are using it as well. It's called nature-based education. This is not a new branch of education. This is not we don't want to have a separate space in the education networks and between the different branches. But what we would like, Sean already mentioned, to show how critical a role nature have in our life and how critical role it should play in our education. If we look around, if we are talking about communication, if we are talking about languages, if we are talking about place-based education, experiential education, there is nothing that doesn't have any connection with nature around us. And sometimes we forget that we are part of it. So this is what we would like to bring back: nature into education and education into nature at the same time. Next one, please. CBD is using CEPA. It's called communication, education, and public awareness. I personally love using it that communication, education, participation, and awareness. This is the same acronym, but the participation shows that all of us have an active role in it. And Sean mentioned the formal, non-formal, and informal setting for the learning. And you can see we are talking the same language, just from different backgrounds. This comes from the biodiversity background, and the other one comes from the education background. But we are talking about the same. So let's bring it together. Next one, please. So what does nature education, nature-based education means? Already mentioned, nature at the center of education and learning more into nature. We are looking for holistic education and combine climate, biodiversity, water, and in water I can mention the landlocked water and the ocean at the same time. And if we think it, this is the basis. This is where we live in. It's a living system we are part of, and we have to see it in a systemic, holistic way. They are not separate. All of them fits together, and there is a systemic connection between. Let's learn in one and to see how these different parts fit together. Of course, the formal, non-formal, and informal learning, what we would like to support. And the learning comes together with creativity and play. We would like to activate. Bernard said that we should teach to act. We should educate to act. We should engage to act. Let's use the education that could help. And what we would like to use, the nature-based education, is an approach to the global plan of action for biodiversity, what we are planning to create a kind of a model plan for it in IUCN Commission and Education, and the task force with our partners. Next one, please. It's already mentioned, what do we need? We need enhanced education frameworks. We need greener learning spaces. I can imagine in a learning space, a hospital that have a huge garden and teaches how to use healing herbs. And there is a study pass in the hospital. And also the study shows that the healing happens more fast, more quickly, more rapidly, if there are some green places around. Even if you see a tree from the window, it helps. Let's use these places to learn, to support learning for everyone who is there. We need prepared educators, and in educators, we need even the media workers as well. Everybody who is preparing and supporting, sharing information, and motivating to act people or to change some awareness. We need political commitment, of course, for the funding, especially. We need partnerships, so please join us. And of course, we need places to connect with nature in a city park, a school garden, or a hospital, or a business campus location. Next one, please. You can join us, but Sean already mentioned in the nature-based education task force as an organization or as a person. Next one. And how, next one, please. And how to contribute. For students and young people, I could encourage them, be open to learn and go out and to see what's there and become role models. The scouts, the camp organizers, the young leaders, the young advocates could be a role model for students, for younger ones, to show how to advocate for nature and biodiversity and value the nature around us. You can participate as members in the IUCN Commission on Education and Communication or the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and you can use your voice and you can work together to co-create a global plan of action, but not only the plan, but to implement on the field and in every local spaces. And for the teachers, almost the same. Please help us to educate about nature, for nature, probably in nature, and very meaningfully with nature, because the nature is the bigger teacher. If we look around, it shows us the system, it shows us how not to overuse the resources, how to be connected, how to understand the other parts, how to cooperate. We have to engage students in the, and please engage your students in the projects and share and look for good practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Sean, I didn't get a chance to say thank you very much to you. I think you have opened so many opportunities where we could take this agenda. One in particular we have within the European region, Kathleen, before the side event, we're discussing a little bit. We have the UNECE Steering Committee on Education for Sustainable Development. That is also a place where we should use that network to further advance what you're trying to do in terms of the development of the global plan of action for biodiversity and beyond. At the same time, also, we're looking forward in 2027, also SDG 4 on education, SDG 12 on sustainable consumption production, SDG 15 on life on land. They will be under review, and I think this body of work that is being done should also shape the implementation of the 4 SDGs that I mentioned. Thank you very much. Having said that, now I move to Charles from, he's the Global Head for Nature-Based Solutions at IUCN. IUCN is a very dear partner to UNEP in many ways. We try to define what nature-based solution is, and you guys are actually practicing it, and we are also practicing it. So question I have for you is, in terms of integrating nature-based solution into education frameworks and policies, what is being done? That is one, but maybe linked to that, the second component is how do we enhance understanding of nature's transformative potential in urban settings, in rural settings, in coastal areas? How do we use nature-based solutions in bringing it to life in the cities that we live in, whether they're in the midst of the city or in the rural area or in the coastal areas? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for the opportunity, and thanks to colleagues who have already touched many of great points that I would have otherwise repeated. So let me start by saying that I think, and this is my strong belief, is that whenever we involved and start engaging education sector, that's the right time we start talking about transformation, because we are all, in one way or another, the results of what we have been learning and what we have learned, and education, therefore, is one of the powerful tools to actually bring about transformation. Now, if we talk about this, transformation is absolutely important to recognize that young people, therefore, they are the agents of change when it comes to long-term transformation. And I was very pleased when you asked me to talk about nature-based solutions and how to mainstream this. And I don't have a presentation, so I just want to share what I believe in, so you can at least listen and not necessarily pay attention to many things on the screen at the same time. You mentioned that nature-based solution has taken a long time to get where they are today. I think it's a journey of nearly 15 years, more than that, probably starting from 2009 to 2022, when we had a finally agreed multilateral definition. And this was a result of really many players, not only IUCN and UNEP, but also several civil society organizations, several researchers and academicians who strongly contributed to that. And we finally have agreed multilateral definition. I remember in 2017, I was working on a proposal, and I had put exactly nature-based solutions definition from IUCN and we started discussing with about 5 countries, and one minister raised a question, which was legitimate. He said, oh, but up to now, we don't have a grid definition from multilateral process. And I was like, okay, hang on a second. I didn't realize that was a problem, because I thought nature-based solutions are actions that can bring that transformation. But indeed, multilateral definition was there, and nature-based solutions have been defined in a quite understandable way that are ways to work with nature to address societal challenges. And this could be whatever they are, climate change or disaster. But I think there are a couple of important nuances there. There's a nuance on how this should benefit people and biodiversity. So biodiversity remains a critical component of nature-based solution. As a matter of fact, we say that if they don't deliver on human well-being and biodiversity benefits, they are not nature-based solutions. They could be other types of solutions, but they are not necessarily nature-based solutions. And you talked about the urban, and I think everyone here likes planting trees, right? And urban green space, they are amazing. In France, they are now moving into a big program in Paris of 15 minutes green space. Every 15 minutes, you have to see a green place. It's beautiful, it's amazing. But I also have a personal observation in my career that planting many trees do not necessarily bring the rewards of ecosystem service. Therefore, we need to be also thinking about how do we plant trees that actually brings about biodiversity in the ecosystem. And that's one side of the coin, right? But these nature-based solutions, in a real sense, they are not fringe solutions. They are actually frontline solutions. They should be able to help us. And as I speak about your question, I want just to note a couple of points here, just to really emphasize that nature-based solution at least could help us avoid a lot of economic losses that we are seeing today. And there's a recent report which I was reading. It's from different scholars and World Bank and many others who realized that actually nature-based solution could help the world to save nearly 125 trillion annually by just successfully implementing nature-based solutions that will reverse loss of ecosystem or nature degradation, we call it. And this is significant. So you can talk about those benefits. You can even quote the IPCC recent report, which shows that nearly 37% of cost-effective climate solution could be generated through NBS. But would that be enough? I think we have the definition. We know they are very potential. We know they can actually play a big role. And as a matter of fact, they touch all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We used to think in IUCN that they touch only about 10 of them. But I did a critical, detailed analysis, and they touch all of them, including partnership, how we work together, because nature calls for a cross-sectoral collaboration. Again, there is a lot of good things happening at national level across different countries. And this is where I start looking at how actually the transformative power of nature-based solution can also be enhanced. And one sector that still lagging behind, I think, to talk about nature-based solutions is actually in education. And I'm glad that Sean and the colleagues have already talked about this should be mainstreamed, not only in climate policies. We nicely talk about NDCs and NBSA, but how about education? How about national curriculum? Because we all believe that education is that transformative power we can carry forward. And I think that's really something we are looking forward to work with many other organizations to see how can nature-based solution actually be mainstreamed beyond what we call crisis addressing policies or economic policies, but also systemic changes based on how education can work. And it's possible, right? It's very possible if we can embed nature-based solution in the curriculum. And this, we have already seen a couple of countries. I was in China 3 weeks ago. I was surprised to see that some provincial level curriculum have started embedding deliberately nature-based solutions, including field experience to implement them, to apply them, to do them. Taking kids to camping schools where they really take action on mangrove, on forest restoration, on agricultural, sustainable agricultural practices, etc. So we can talk about that, but it's not enough. Probably we need to do more also on actually training teachers, right? Most of teachers go through formal education, but actually we need to work with how do we develop a capacity professional training for teachers on how to do that. UCN have been working on together with our academy on developing professional certificate for nature-based solutions. Many people of profile of people who joined the course, about 500 now. I was checking profile before this meeting. I didn't see educators a lot. Probably some scientists and researchers in university, but primary education and secondary education, they probably, I didn't see a profile. So imagine that's 500. There might be too many of those. How do we bring in this professional training on that going forward? And one critical element that we need to reflect on as I close is policy alignment. I think there's an ongoing consideration. We can talk about the Rio Convention's policy alignment, but they remain policy. But how about actual education as an engine of change? I think it should be actually at the heart of sustainable biodiversity management and conservation, etc. And because these are already things that are happening within the national processes, I think it's important to continue put this seed of education into the current ongoing process of NDC, the alignment, NBSAP development, and land degradation and other things that people see immediately when we talk about nature-based solutions. Just finally to close, I think my 3 points on call for action here is really that learning should be integrated in all these discussions at policy level, at practice level. And learning and the action and the connecting and they are all equally important, but more importantly, without nature and biodiversity and finally nature-based solutions, I think, to be honest, there's no sustainable development. And I don't think that. And without young people, there's no transformation. So education, nature, sustainable development, young people, I think they should be a nexus that we could start working with if we really want systemic change going forward. I will stop there and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's very, very useful. Now, with that in mind, you talked about young people being the engine for transformation. I moved to a young man from the UN Advisory Council, Youth Advisory Council in Azerbaijan. A very specific question for you in terms of how is biodiversity education taken at the national level, and what kind of support do you require? The youth team is supposed to support the UN system itself. What kind of support do you need? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Tural Adzad, and I'm joining you today as a member of the UN Youth Advisory Council in Azerbaijan, and I'm also currently pursuing my master's degree in educational management at ADA University. So education is not just my field, it's something I deeply believe in, and it feels especially timely to be speaking now. Just a few months after, as you all know, COP29 was hosted in Baku for Azerbaijan. This wasn't only a diplomatic or a formal event. It was a moment of pride, of responsibility, and for many of us youths, a chance to feel truly seen in global climate discussions. Personally, I see education not just as a way to share knowledge, but as a pathway to change. And when we talk about biodiversity, I believe education is one of the most powerful tools. We have to build awareness and move from words to action. Firstly, I want to, sorry, next, please. Yeah, next, please. Yeah. First, I want to mention that Azerbaijan is quite special when it comes to biodiversity. Despite being relatively small in size, our country contains nine out of the world's 11 climate zones. From subtropical wetlands to alpine meadows, we're lucky to experience such variety. We're home to more than 4.5 thousand plant species and 850 species of vertebrates, including rare and endangered animals like the Caucasian leopard, the Persian gazelle, and the European bison. But of course, like many parts of the world, we are facing serious threats: climate change, pollution, habitat degradation. And that's why biodiversity education is so critical, not just to inform, but to inspire a sense of connection and care. Next, please. Now let's talk about what we as the UN Youth Advisory Council can do starting at the national level. In Azerbaijan, we already have some promising practices to build on. Let me share a few. First, our eco clubs. There are more than 2.5 thousands of them in Baku alone, supported by the Ministry of Education and Science, as UNDP reported. These clubs give students a platform to explore sustainability topics in an active, hands-on way. UNYAC can advocate for expanding these models to more regions, especially where access is limited. Second, we can contribute to developing a youth-led strategy for biodiversity education, something that reflects both global frameworks like the SDGs and COP outcomes, and also the real needs and voices of young people on the ground. Third, experimental learning is key. Field visits to national parks like Shahdar and Shirvan are incredibly powerful. They help young people build emotional connection to nature, and UNYAC could work to make these opportunities more accessible and consistent across the country, even in the rural places. Fourth, we can continue to build on the momentum of COP29. In Azerbaijan, student-led COP simulations and forums allowed youth to engage with policy discussion in meaningful ways. And we also had a pavilion on Green Zone, and we do our best. And these kinds of initiatives shouldn't be on-time events. They should become part of how we engage youth regularly. And fifth one is establishing a network, youth biodiversity ambassadors. We have Young Climate in Voice under UNICEF, and they worked excellently during COP29. Also trained and supported young people who can lead awareness campaigns, speak in schools, and represent their peers in policy spaces. Last but not least, we can focus on creative digital outreach. And I want to mention that during COP29, several NGOs and businesses invested on it. Thanks to these hackathons, quite a lot of environmental startups improved in Caucasus, in the region. Also, educational animations like Health Environment, Health Future have already reached over 20,000 students in Azerbaijan, as UNICEF reported in 2021. Let's invest in more youth-friendly, accessible materials across languages and formats. Next, please. Of course, to make these ideas a reality, we do need support, and that's where the UN country team can play a vital role. Firstly, we will really benefit from institutional recognition. Embedding youth-led biodiversity education into frameworks like the UN SDCF or voluntary national reviews will give our work legitimacy and sustainability. Second one is resources. Resources are really matter. Even small grants, expert guidance, or access to digital platforms can help youth groups make a much great impact. And the third one is creating opportunities for peer learning and exchange. The biodiversity camps we have had in Azerbaijan focused on gazelles, leopards, and and bison were amazing. It was also held by IDEA, its International Dialogue for Environmental Actions, and WWF. Imagine connection youth from across the region to share experiences and ideas. And finally, the last one is, would really appreciate more structured ways to engage with policy, which both the policies are, invited from UN to the Azerbaijani government and vice versa. And we also really want to have an YOSLED set and consultation tables. Actually, we have, but it's limited. Curriculum reviews, as my colleagues mentioned, or national education strategies would allow us to not just participate, but contribute meaningfully. Next, please. Reflecting on COP29, I think it gave us not only visibility, but momentum. In Azerbaijan, we saw school-led biodiversity projects and expansion of the eco-school network and a growing number of youth speaking up with confidence and clarity. It showed us that when young people, governments, and young institutions work hand in hand, we can do beyond dialogue and move into real actions. But now the spotlight has moved on. We need to make sure that the energy continues. And lastly, next please, I want to mention that biodiversity education isn't about memorizing facts. It's about building values. It's about helping young people see themselves as part of nature, not separate from it. If we want to create a more resilient and respectful world, we have to invest in youth, not just with encouragement, but with trust. As we experience, there's a huge gap between we and the policymakers, being honest, including UN, who think quite different, but you are the ones who have authority and power. I call every one of the parties work together in order to preventing these global issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tural. That was very comprehensive, and we'll take you on your points, and we will be organizing World Environment Day in Baku next year. So we look forward to working with you in terms of how do we promote biodiversity education in your country and beyond, and how do we get as many young people as possible involved in terms of advancing the biodiversity agenda. Thank you very much. Now, let me move to our last speaker. Pramod is from the Foundation for Environment Education. Long standing partner, but also you've done so many amazing things in terms of connecting students, teachers, communities in terms of nature. If you have somebody right behind you, it's all right. The question I have for you is, how do we leverage all this work you've done in the past, in particular that connection between students, teachers, and nature, in terms of even further advancing this global action plan on biodiversity education? Over to you.
Thank you, Wandy, and good afternoon from Copenhagen. So nice to be here and sharing the work that Foundation for Environmental Education is doing for over 40 years. And our role has been basically, as practitioners, connecting stakeholders through our 5 programs, both in tourism sector and also working with young people, particularly when we talk about students in formal settings and educators. And that too, mostly focusing on hands-on approach, practical and experiential ways. That has been the approach FEE has taken. You're all aware in most cases, and the young representative from Baku also highlighted the eco school program. But then we have learning about forests and young reporters also, with involving over 53,000 schools from 100 countries. They are just not teaching about environmental facts. That was also highlighted, that facts is important, but that doesn't empower a young person to take action. And what we say that it's to take in terms of taking positive action, what we call handprint, it is important that we involve them in those solutions and solutions implementation as such. And in our programs, it is not just about education, but it's about taking like learning about ecosystem, and forest is focusing on conservation action. And those can look different in different place, because it's place-based education that we are talking about, which could look like reforesting a hillside, even reforesting or greening your school grounds, setting up those urban pollinators gardens. And in this processes, biodiversity becomes part of the school environment and identity as such. Many authors speakers here have highlighted the fact that environmental education must go beyond knowledge. It must build connection. Connection has come out again as a key word here. And that leads to basically, that connection leads to commitment. That is a better predictor of conservation action. So we need to also move from just the awareness raising activities, but focus on raising actions or approaches that changes the disposition or the ability to act, take an intention to take action as such. And when we are working at this scale, it is basically collaboration is the key, and synergies have to be developed. We cannot burden our education system with different adjectival education. We talk about nature education, nature-based education, climate change education. I think we need to work together and understand. We are proud partners of both Greening Education Partnership and also the Decade on UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We are trying to bring synergies and making it easy for our systems on the networks to understand what needs to be done and how it affects, one action affects different realms of environmental issues that we are realizing, whether we speak from the planetary crisis in terms of pollution or biodiversity conservation or climate change as such. So we work globally, but our actions and results are local and tangible, because the processes that we involve students or young people in is looking at the issues that are there in their immediate surrounding. And I would like to highlight that we encourage young people not to frame environmental education or environmental action from a problem perspective. We should appreciate and encourage the good practices, which might be the wisdom that we might be having in the community, and appreciate those actions that can be that those are still relevant and are being there, and might have been the reason where where we don't see a problem. And in many cases, what I have seen is that they are being repackaged as nature-based solutions as such, but those are common sense that usually resides within the communities. And though in that process, like for example, in schools in US and Norway are handling many issues in a holistic way, like waste, water, climate change, through gardens, water harvesting, audits of pollution. Even one school in US studied the problem salmons were facing because the river was dammed, and how they can act to bring that species back into their ecosystem as such. Uh, we have also seen adaptation acts like, for example, schools in Bahamas are building vertical hydroponics systems within the school itself as an adaptation action. In India, the schools are planting trees to lower down the temperature within the school community as such, school grounds as such. In Cyprus, even the early childhood education, the 4-year-old are looking at and experiencing biodiversity through forest-based activities. And in Spain, university students are worked through a research approach to reclaim degraded land through native planting and also conservation of water. So these are not symbolic gestures that, as I see, but these are place but scalable action that can be easily replicated around the world. The other point that I would like to highlight is that the teachers or educators are the key. They are central to success in this process when we are talking about education. When teachers feel ownership, they are motivated, they are able to inspire students and young people. And when students are trusted, by the systems and by the community, they're happy to lead. And I'm again emphasizing they are not future leaders, they are leaders now. They can take action as of today as such. And then by empowering educators, not following any rigid curricula, but with helping them with the tools to activate the existing curriculum to handle the problems that through a pedagogical process, we are helping teachers to lead this process. And we have set up an online teaching learning platform called Fee Academy to help educators around the world in this process and perfecting and building their capacity to lead this process. We are now also have an annual campaign which is called Global Action Days, and one of my colleagues will be presenting it tomorrow. But then in 2024, almost 500,000 students from 180 countries joined, and today we were reviewing the data. We already have crossed the 120 countries, and this year the Global Action Days is focusing on raising awareness on ecosystem restoration and encouraging children and the communities connected with the schools in understanding how simple action can be restorative for the planet, starting with a place-based action. So the question no longer from our experience is whether education matters. It is basically how we can mobilize it with purpose and where clear objectives are given and understood and basically agreed upon. So our experience shows that the rooting education in a standard pedagogical approach, grounding it in a place-based local action and linking it to the global frameworks like Greening Education Partnership, ESD 2030, or Global Plan of Action, we can help the generations to take action for a sustainable world. So let us put all the tools together, work in a collaborative way, and trust our young people to lead this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's nicely said that we have all the tools available. Let's put them on the table to reshape what the global action plan for biodiversity education look like. We're done with all the panelists. I know we've gone by 10 more minutes and we will not go into Q&A. But what I will do is I'll go back to Bernard to say a few things and we'll close after that. Yeah.
Say a few things. Well, I think we have covered the subject well. I think I would say what comes out is that we need to learn to care for ourselves, for others, and for the planet through both learning and acting. I think from what the various speakers have brought up, we have to see education in the large sense of the word, lifelong education and learning, life-wide, intergenerational, that we also need to actually, stop, in a way, stop thinking, but start acting more. That as was said, the tools, there's plenty of tools out there. There's plenty of information out there. We just have to grab that, and basically go for it. And just to, I think, to conclude, I would say it basically shows us that we need to rethink how we think about all these processes and all these action plans, strategic frameworks, NBSAP, NDCs, so that we ensure that we really rebalance our relationship with nature, and that we really learn and act for sustainability, regardless of whatever institutional hat we wear, and whatever age we are. Basically, we need to. We have. I mean, we have all the things there. We basically need to mobilize this. Basically, this transformative power of the various players around the table, the various actors, and it's time to actually act and move on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well said. I know this institutionally probably this is the last time you'll be speaking as UNESCO. But for my part and from so many of our colleagues, our networks, we have enormously benefited from your wisdom on a variety of issues, and we cannot thank you enough for all the things you've done in terms of advancing the sustainability agenda. So this is not the end of it, but we will have you with a different hat, particularly how best we can take this agenda further. This is just the beginning of a conversation, but we will make sure that we will set up other dialogues in the near future, how best to take the global action plan for biodiversity education. With that, I want to thank all of you, and I turn the table back to Diana.
Just to remind everybody that we are back tomorrow at 8:45 with an event where we are going to discuss the Pact for the Future and the Declaration on Future Generations. So we hope to see you back then, and we warmly thank you for having joined this session or for watching later the video of the event, and warm thanks to all the panelists who joined us for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.